Okay, welcome into this thing on editing instruments, internal control. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about external control in Logic, and we're doing stuff on bouncing quickly. Mostly you'll be needing to look at the screen. So, looking up, if you don't know the answers to these questions, this is for the Unit 32 stuff that we're doing. These are for the questions on those subjects. So here we have some MIDI parts in Logic, and we're just going to play a few of them. Here's this Yamaha part. So there's a piano part. Lovely. Let's just turn that off. Right. Anyway, all well and good. In Logic, if you want to edit the instruments you want to do it in a simplistic way, you can double-click on the cartoon representation of that instrument on screen. You can then have access to the smart controls, which are context-aware controls from the synthesizer that's working in the background. So the synthesizer in the background has a large amount of controls. Let's just go and use the inspector on that. This particular sound's coming from the EXS24 sampler, and if we open that up, there's loads of controls on that. So you've got controls for anything that you would want to change. So that in all parts of synthesizer editing. What Logic tends to do to make your lives easier is, depending on the context, if it's a piano, they will offer, ESX24 knows to offer you a different set of controls on the screen than if it is a synthesizer. So the synthesizer offers you a different set of controls on the screen. That's how this works. So you can just change those controls. So with this one I can put some delay on there, that's nice. And some reverb. I think the reverb's grayed out on this one. It's just turned off for the minute. You can also use compression on a piano. It's not wildly effective. There's also a slight amount of EQ on there, low and high, so I can make it a brighter piano, which is pretty horrible, or a darker piano. So in terms of the synthesizer here, let's get something that we've actually got to access. So there you go, we got this one. So I'm just going to turn the automation off for a second so that we can catch light of what's going on. So there's this synthesizer. With this synthesizer, it's sort of aping a mini Moog sort of set here. You've got various synthesizer type controls, things like cutoff, which is a sort of an EQ with a resonance to make the cutoff more buzzy and have more interest to it. You've got things like octave mixes to make it a more interesting sound in the first place, and you've got like a sub oscillator in there as well, so that you can do that. It's also got effects on there. But as I say, this is all context driven. Depending on what kind of a synthesizer it is, what kind of a sound it is, it will offer you different editing options. So let's turn that on. So for instance, this drum machine, this BTEC U32 Logic, we're using for hi-hats here. So you've got a different set of editing options for that than you would for the others. Okay, so that's editing instruments. Let's just talk quickly about internal control. Internal control is very similar to when we've used automation. Automation is internal control. It's the internal control that you want to be thinking about for this one. So there's the automation, show hide automation button, which is very useful. And then up here, for instance, we can go into this track and we can choose what automation you're going to do. So we could just use volume, which you're very used to. You use volume, and then when we click on here, there's our volume, and we can change our volume over time, so that's internal control of the volume. But on top of that, Logic and all of the other doors allow you to change the controls. For instance, it allows you access to the smart controls here that will be for this synth, so things like cutoff. As you can see, I've done some cut-off changes to this. I'm just going to make these a little bit more obvious, so you can put changes to that, and we can play our way through these, and you'll see this actually change the smart controls. So you can just about see that cut-off knob is changing. Let's just solo this one. There you go. So the cut-off is changing quite rapidly on there because it's got the automation here. So as we run our way through these, you see the cut-off and the resonance that I've automated here. This one is an absolute banger. This is Children by Robert Miles, by the way. It was released about 3 times. Oh, we've come to the end of the silence section. Right, that's internal control. You can quite easily compare using automation for these to just editing your synthesizers. Editing your synthesizers is generally for a quick change. If I just want my synth to be slightly less bright, a quick edit will do it. If I actually want that to change over time, then automation is my friend. Okay? External control is another layer of this. In external control, you can use the knobs and sliders, which you've arranged very beautifully on that keyboard there. You can use the knobs and sliders on the keyboard to change certain aspects of the sound. So for instance, again, if I run into this synthesizer and we've got our systems here, if I move this cutoff and then go up here to Logic Pro X and go to Control Surfaces, I can ask it to learn the assignment for cutoff, and anything that I move, any knob that I move on my controller keyboard will then operate that cutoff. It knows I want to do cutoff because it was the last thing that I moved. If I move resonance instead, and then go up to Logic Pro X, Control Surfaces. See, now it says learn assignment for resonance. So Logic will dynamically, the nice thing about Logic is it works with you as an assistant. It will actually dynamically change this. So if you think about, those are in the videos that I passed out as well, but for instance, if you're using Studio One and you've got a controller and it's set up with Studio One properly, you can then go into any synthesizer, right-click on a control on a knob and say learn MIDI control for this, and then you shift the real world physical control on your controller keyboard and it will pick that up. So they're very similar systems. So what's the point of that? It's nice to have tactile contact with your keyboard and be able to change these things. I wonder, let me just have a quick look, just out of interest. Is it possible that there functions as I would like it to do? Control Surfaces. No, it doesn't. This one doesn't work for that. Okay. Actually, let's just see. Let's try that one more time. I'm just seeing whether I can change this using the volume control on my large piano keyboard in front of me. So just going to do learn the assignment for cutoff. Let's click learn. No, we're not doing anything. Okay, so that the volume control on my piano keyboard in front of me is a dumb control. It doesn't work with that, and we don't have any modulation wheel at the side. So this is for use with controller keyboards that have modulation on them and also have knobs and sliders on them, like most of the ones in the music department. Right, last one is bouncing. The few things you'll need to know about bouncing is a short précis of how to bounce out your work. So just letting us know that you're aware of how to bounce your work out, which usually means striping along the top so that you can say which bit of your song you want to export, then going to File, going to Bounce, and saying Project or Selection. You will have to know the difference between bouncing out a wave, which is uncompressed audio, that is the best the audio can sound. 16-bit 44100 is the same quality as a CD, if you remember those. Those were slightly shiny plastic discs that we used to have music on in the old days. So 16-bit 44,100 times, it takes 16 bits of information 44,100 times a second, and that is pretty good quality. MP3s come in different qualities. It's generally accepted that most people, sort of about 80% of people they reckon in testing, couldn't tell the difference between 128 kilobits per second MP3 and a CD quality WAV. Most musicians can, so using something like 192 is probably better. That is a quality that you'll probably enjoy listening to a little bit more. The general rule of thumb is that MP3s are about 1/10 of the data size of a WAV, so these things are worth putting in. WAVs are really good quality but very big, and MP3s are not as good quality but very small. There you go. And that's probably the most that you need to know about bouncing. Okay.